Welcome back, everyone. Well, spring is on the calendar. We've had a week and a half to adjust to clocks going ahead. We've had warmer weather in many regions. Some call it fake spring, of course, and there's still Sheila's brush lore. But either way, it's here, and a new season is as well, despite what you might see outside of your window. Here to talk about the physical and psychological effects of turning the calendar in spring is Dr. Janine Hubbard. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks once again for having me.
Happy spring.
Well, at least Newfoundland version of spring.
Yeah, fake spring. So, Dr. Hubbard, do you notice physical and emotional differences at the start of spring? Tell me a little bit about, how that all, if it's a placebo or if it's a real thing.
Well, it's interesting. It's actually not all in your mind. I mean, certainly we all know that some warmer weather and some sunshine makes us feel better, but there's some evidence that suggests, kind of like in the fall, that exposure to sunlight can really make a difference on our neurotransmitters. Same thing. So the melatonin, which makes us sleepy and lethargic in the winter, decreases, but in particular, additional exposure is found to increase our levels of serotonin, which is the happy hormone. That's the one that makes us feel good. That's the one that's often involved in antidepressants. So if we're getting natural boosts of that just by the fact that we're seeing the daylight for longer hours, that can have a big impact. The other thing that's kind of secondary is, it's delight when we go home in the evenings, which means we're more likely to perhaps go for a walk, take the dog out, start getting involved in evening sports activities, and maybe doing more socializing. And we know that all of those have a really positive effect on our mood and have been demonstrated, to improve things like depression. I guess the other thing that I like to mention, though, is it can have the inverse effect on some people. There are some conditions that spring actually seems to worsen mental health symptoms. So I always caution people, especially as you're seeing everyone else feeling more optimistic, more hopeful, more energy. If that's not how you're feeling, please make sure you're, raising it with a healthcare professional, because it can be something that needs some attention.
All really good points. Earlier in this season, we talked about the start of a new year, and we talked about setting small, achievable goals. Maybe this is a time of year to actually reflect on some of those goals that we set out earlier and do a bit of a self-check-in on whether or not we accomplished anything small and achievable.
I think it's great, partly because it's a nice accountability, but also if you are feeling that little bit of surge of energy, that's why people start getting their gardening ready. That's why we hear about spring fever and spring cleaning. We also know that if you're in a decluttered and clean environment, that also has positive impact on your mental health. So there's cycling there, but just even there's some thought that being in nature, observing nature, because quite frankly in the spring nature is really interesting. You see daily changes in, suddenly there's crocuses appearing, or you're seeing buds on the trees. We also know from the research that intentional interest and exposure to nature can also have really significant benefits for us. But there's also just it feels like a time of hope, of optimism, of moving forward, and yes, some reflection. So it is very much, some of it's based in some religious traditions, but if you think about it as a time of rebirth, we see it in nature, and it's something that is a really good opportunity for us. Take advantage of that surge of energy, get out and enjoy the good days when they're here. Be realistic, it's not actual spring yet. The weather is still going to be miserable, so be prepared for that. And, maybe use it as a time of reflection of how do I want to grow? I'm seeing nature grow. I'm seeing lots happen around me. What are some personal growth areas that maybe I want to put the focus on because I've got that little bit of extra energy and I've got what feels like more time in the day because of the additional sunlight hours?
All good points to consider. Dr. Janine Hubbard, thanks so much for being here again.
Thanks, Jody.